Looks like we got a lot of people kind of rolling in right now, so I think we should be good to go ahead and get started here. All right. So, good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining us from around the world. My name is Tyler McCluskey, and I'll be your host today for a live discussion, Humanizing Academic Integrity in Higher Education. Today, we are joined by Dr. Drew Smith from Walsh College, where he serves as the Director of Online Learning and is a member of the Academic Conduct Committee. Drew, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Suffice it to say, 2020 was a wild year. We've heard it a million times, over and over again, and it's likely to go down in the history books as a defining moment for generations to come. In the realm of education, it changed teaching and learning for everyone. And now that we've had a full calendar year to kind of learn, reflect, and regroup, we want to explore the positive outcomes of such trying times. So the key learning outcomes for this event are threefold. Number one, to reframe the role of students in academic integrity cases by cultivating a perspective of we rather than you versus me. Two, to embrace open and meaningful dialogue about academic integrity to break the stigmas around the topic. And three, to posture assessments and text similarity tools as ways to deepen and explore learning rather than using them as snares of offense. So next, I'd like to kind of segue into the actual conversation here. So Drew, here we are about 1 year since the world turned upside down. I'm curious if you can kind of like set the scene for us a bit about your school, the type of students you work with, and what you've discovered in terms of growing from this type of upending experience.
Yeah, that's a huge question, right? I'll tell you first a little bit about our school. So I work at Walsh College. We are a private nonprofit business school located in Metro Detroit, Michigan, in Troy. We are upper division, so we leverage the community colleges. They're kind of a feeder school for freshman, sophomore. They kind of roll into our programs. So we offer undergraduate, graduate, and doctorate degrees. So we're getting a lot of people who are they're non-traditional students, right? They're not straight out of high school. They're not looking for the Greek life. They are working adults with families, with homes and jobs and responsibilities and kids and a wife and a dog or husband, whatever. That we've got the adults. So we're dealing primarily with adult students at our institution. So from that regard, my perspective is going to be, and our experiences are going to be a little bit different than the traditional 4-year, the students that are more traditional students. We don't have dormitories, it's commuter school. So a lot of the issues that we had with COVID when it hit didn't really affect us the same way. We didn't have to shut down dormitories. The majority of our courses at Walsh are online to some degree already. So we've been doing online programming since '98, I think. So it's been a long time. And the majority, let's see, I think 50 to 60% of our courses were already running asynchronously virtually. So when we got hit a year ago, the transition to go fully remote was not as painstaking as some other institutions. I mean, I know some of the 4-year institutions around us where it was paralyzing. Like it was just total chaos. For us, fortunately we had systems already in place so that the move online, while it wasn't easy, it was much less rocky than it could have been. Let me try and think about everything else that I wanted to talk about with Walsh. So when the pandemic hit, our main focus at the time was on supporting the faculty in that transition, right? Mm-hmm. We were really trying to focus on the teachers to make sure they had what they needed to move everything online for the courses that were running on ground. It hit during finals week for us. We run on quarters, right? So COVID hit during finals week, or actually 3 days before finals week. So we had to transition all of our on-ground finals into an online format. The majority of courses that we had already had those formats in place, so that was very fortunate. The ones that didn't, I'd say, there were 10 or 15 of them in total. So it really wasn't bad for us. We just had to rush to make sure that these assessments were able to be put online right away. In the process, and then we started a week after COVID hit is when we started our spring semester, and we had to do everything virtually, right? So there was a huge shift there as well. Courses that were supposed to run on ground or as a 2+2 model, right? Half online, half on ground in person. Suddenly that wasn't the case. Some instructors chose to leverage the material that they had already in an online format. Some instructors chose to use Zoom for a synchronous meeting time. But again, it was really rushed. It was really chaotic, but we managed to struggle through, right? Everything launched pretty smooth for the most part. And I think overall it went fairly well. But we realized that within all of these changes, the institution was really focused on making sure the instructors, the faculty and the courses were all set. We didn't really give much. The students ended up becoming a bit of an afterthought, in my opinion. We didn't have time to do a focus group to say, how would you rather that we do this course? How would you rather this be run? We were off to the races and we had to do what we had to do. So about halfway through our spring semester, we launched a 3-question pulse check survey with the students to find out what was working, what was helping them learn, what was hindering them learning, and what we could do to better support their learning. And overwhelmingly, the majority of students said, there's not a lot the institution can do right now because my life is just upended. We had some students come back and say, there's nothing Walsh can do. I'm going to have to drop out. I lost my job. That means I'm going to lose my house. We don't know where our meal is going to come from. These were survey results that students were giving to us. I mean, it was a year ago, but we can all remember the panic that was going on. We thought this was going to be a week or two at best, and then it stretched on and on and on. But with this survey, we were able to adapt our modalities, adapt the way that students needed things to be done. We found out there were some courses that they were fine having totally asynchronous. Then there were other courses where students really needed that touch point. They needed to meet with the faculty at a set time and, discuss problems and dialogue about those things. So we were able to really move and shift and adapt based on the feedback from the students.
I think that's fantastic that you kind of like loop back and tried to center them a little bit more and see, what's going on with you and how can we be receptive to that. And I'm curious, I do a lot of industry reading. Almost every morning I do it around academic integrity and assessment and the higher education space. And one of the things that there's a lot of reportage that's surfacing this kind of student mentality of get the right answer, pass the class, rather than learn and apply knowledge. And I'm going to share some of those articles in the chat here in a second, but I'm curious if we can finish out this segment talking about, have you noticed a change in perspective around academic integrity from the point of view of the students?
From the point of view of the students here, well, yeah, I think especially, and I'm the director of online learning, so that's really kind of my world. I'm not in the classroom physically present, but I'm virtually present, right? One thing that I think has shifted over the past maybe decade, and especially in the past few years, and with everything being thrust online now, thanks to COVID, I think we're seeing a shift in how people perceive information. There's a lot of people who perceive it. We're walking around. Everybody's got one of these in their pocket, right? You have instant access to knowledge. It's just a couple thumbs away, and so in a lot of ways, not only that, but we also are seeing a shift in perspective of what constitutes academic integrity. For example, we look at some websites like Course Hero or Chegg, or any of the pay-to-play type websites where you upload information and you get a kickback from it. there are students who don't, like, cognitively, there's a disconnect between like that actually being academic misconduct. They don't recognize that they're essentially giving something to the entire world. I mean, one instructor had described it as, you would never sit down and take an exam in your finance class and then take that exam, shove it under your sweater and walk out the door and share it to all your friends. You wouldn't do that. That's just, everybody knows it's not correct to do. But yet posting it online, somehow there's a disconnect there. But in essence, that's what you're doing. You're not only sharing it with your friends, but you're sharing it with total strangers all across the globe. It's open access. So I think there has been that kind of a disconnect. And I don't think that academia as a whole has done a good job of walking into those programs and problems with the students. Like we kind of leave the students to their own devices, and instead we are reactionary instead of proactive, right?
Right, right. Absolutely.
I think there is a way to be proactive about it, addressing it, talking about it, bringing it up. This shouldn't be an elephant that's in the room, but there is that disconnect still between a virtual environment and a physical classroom environment.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point there, like the pros and cons of the digital age, right? Especially when everyone gets pushed to that online learning environment, there are kind of different scenarios and opportunities, we'll say, that kind of pop up.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of like to move on to what came out of that deeper understanding around the pressures that students face. In other words, how has it shifted institutional and individual? I'm thinking like instructor, administrator level paradigms around academic integrity, specifically at Walsh. Like what does the organization or the infrastructure look like at Walsh that helps to center the student in these instances? And how can these things, whether they're people or processes or policies or tools, help to support the students?
Good question. At Walsh, one of the beautiful things about our institution is that we leverage not only academics at the institution, but we leverage real world working class, the people who are in the industry, right? So you come to Walsh for a business degree because you're learning from the experts in their field, and experts in the field may not always mean that they, went off to university and got a PhD all the time, right? Although many of them do, but they're actually applying what they're learning. I'm likely to become a lifelong academic, right? I will live in the classroom, I will die in the classroom, and I will, it's a lot theory based for me. But with some of our, many of our faculty, they are living it and working it, and they're doing it day to day. So they bring into that classroom a real world experience. Mm-hmm. I think, that's something that we often forget when we're dealing with academia, is that there is going to be a time and a place where what these students are learning will transition into their day-to-day activity and day-to-day life, right? And that includes integrity. That includes how we talk about exams and what we're using the assessments for, and how collaboration works, and it then brings into question why we are assessing the way that we're assessing, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's something else that the pandemic shoving everybody online is also beginning to shift. Is we are in a digital world where I don't always have to know. While there are things that are good for me to foundationally know, I need to know my times tables, right? My son is 7, he's learning those up through 9. He hates doing it, but 9 times 9, he's got to know at the top of his head. But the Pythagorean theorem, something he's not going to use every day, there's nothing wrong with him going to Google and say, hey, Google, what's the Pythagorean theorem, right? Which is a shift from when I was in school. I had to memorize that. And have I ever used it in my day-to-day life? Absolutely not, right? So I think, one thing that we are seeing a shift in is the way that we not only need to assess, but the purpose of the assessment, right? It's to teach those critical thinking skills for individuals. And that is not only an institutional responsibility, but it's an academic, it's an instructor responsibility. I think we are shifting away from the day where the sage on the stage had all the keys to the kingdom. And we now have people that turn to YouTube and can watch a TED Talk that is incredibly entertaining, incredibly informative, and gives us the information that we need right then.
Yeah.
But then we don't always know how to process that information, how to, assimilate it and synergize with it and apply it to the rest of our day. So at Walsh, I think we're working towards a transition out of this rote memorization and into a more applications-based approach to information, to materials.
Yeah. And this kind of segues into a little anecdote that you were telling me about how you're leveraging some of your instructional designers to work with instructors to kind of help facilitate those things. I'm wondering if you would be keen to share.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I had mentioned earlier at Walsh, we've been doing online for over 20 years. And so we've figured out quite a few things, but like any institution, there's always instructors who either don't feel comfortable teaching online, or they just don't know what they don't know. Oftentimes we model the very thing that we were presented with when we were in school, and my grad program was a hybrid. I listened to a lecture, a half an hour lecture. I wrote a discussion board, and then I had a heavy intensive that met all the degree requirements of meeting times, right? Mm-hmm. So, but even before that, in my undergrad program, it was all on ground. So I had never, the concept of an online education wasn't even available to me at that time. And I think that oftentimes we have faculty, especially faculty who have been teaching for a long time and are very experienced, especially in the classroom, they just don't know what they don't know. And I think that's really where an instructional designer helps to partner alongside the instructor, right? They're able to say, yeah, how do you do this in your classroom? Let's talk about what you do in your classroom and what your objectives are in the classroom when you're trying to do X, Y, and Z activity. And the instructor goes through and leverages, everything that they do and all the anecdotes about how amazing it is in the classroom. And the instructional designer can actually take that information and say, okay, let's brainstorm how we do that in an online environment. So the instructor would have no idea. They've never done it before, right? They're blazing a trail for them. But the instructional designer, they're trained in what works, not only what works with within an online environment, but also what works with students' minds. They know about small teaching. They know that the data on that students need bite-sized material, and they can absorb things better if there's self-assessments that are taking place after things. They can build into an online course, these opportunities for not only the instructor to do what they originally wanted to do in the classroom in an online format in some way, but they can also reinforce that learning through other steps or other stages. And that's something that may not be able to do in the classroom. So in some ways, some instructors are recognizing, wow, I can really leverage a whole lot more, many more tools that will not only engage students, but help them learn and retain, and then put into practice what it is that I'm trying to get across to them. One of our instructors, she has always been, I've always been a fan of her. And for the longest time, she told me, I will never teach online. I've been working at the institution for over 10 years, right? She said, I will never teach online. I don't like it. It's not personal with the students. There's no interaction. I love the classroom because I can have these connecting moments with my students. I said, well, we can create courses where that does happen. And she's like, no, I'm not going to do it. When she had to develop an online course, she sat down with one of our instructional designers. And at the end of creating this course, the instructional designer had made a total convert out of this faculty member. And it wasn't that, she didn't change her mind. She just opened her eyes, right? Because it's not about shifting your mind necessarily. It's just about opening your eyes to the new possibilities that an online education can afford you as an instructor. And then leveraging those tools to really make it stick. It's pretty great. Now the instructor is a huge proponent. She's like, I love teaching online. It's great, especially now in this COVID era where we're leveraging synchronous tools like Zoom. She said it's the best thing in the world. She now, when she sits down in front of her class, at her kitchen table, she can talk to her students who are also at their kitchen tables, and she sees aspects of their life going on all around them, right? She says it's great because she's getting a peek into who they are and what's going on in their world. So to her, it's really opened up the door for connection and community.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I kind of like you said, like the Zoom is in a way a window into everyone else's world, and you get to see them more as you know, a human being rather than, you know, these roles that we're generally in the institution.
Right.
So I'm curious, in moving on to our last segment here, I want to talk about tools and technology and how they're a piece of the puzzle in the larger holistic picture of academic integrity. I know you mentioned how you leverage Turnitin Feedback Studio, so I'd like to hear about that in kind of a broader sense. However, I'm also curious to home in on the kind of the how of using these tools. Before we've spoken about the language that we use to kind of describe these things. We've talked about not using cutoff scores or harnessing it more as a formative tool in the instructor's tool belt for teachable moments rather than, as we mentioned before, snares of offense. And what that kind of like more purposeful use shows or models to the student.
Yeah, you know, there's starting to be a push in higher education to do this metacognition, right? Where you're actually thinking about what you're learning while you're learning it. And I think Turnitin, you know, the originality score, the feedback studio, I think is a great opportunity for us to leverage that. So I'm teaching a course this semester, and I'm allowing the students, I'm giving them a wide range of final projects, final papers that they can work on. But one of the things I'm going to continue to talk to them about throughout the semester is how I want them to leverage a draft, you know, to run a draft through Turnitin, not so that they can see where they need to fix things, but because that's one perspective, right? That's one side of the coin. Turnitin shows you where you've copied a resource from. That's really great. However, it doesn't teach the student anything, right? And oftentimes, like you were saying, we use this as a punitive device. You know, you get a Turnitin score, it comes back, it's all red, and you know, you see you got a 5% match at this other place, and suddenly, you know, the academic conduct committee is getting called in, and it becomes a thing that is a little more humiliating to the student, opposed to approaching it from a perspective of, hey, there's 5% match here. Let's look at why that is. Oh, you forgot to do your quotes. You forgot to add quotes. You cited it in text, but you forgot to put quotes around it. Lesson learned. Let's move on, right? It becomes a tool where a student can grow and change and really begin to think more about how they are presenting their own knowledge, right? How they're wording, how they are synergizing, or what is it when you bring things together?
Integrate.
Thank you. Okay, that'll work. How they integrate, you know, the concepts that they're learning, and then their application of it on the whatever the assignment is. You know, so while the score doesn't change, the intention behind that score or that percentage, right? The intention behind it shifts. I have had instructors who will say, you know, if you get anything over a 14%, you're going to academic conduct, which that it defies logic for me, because if the instructor needs to actually look and say, okay, what is the 14% coming from? I mean, it's entirely possible that the 14% that comes in could be accidental. It could be, you know, whatever it is, but it's totally acceptable the way that it's written in the paper, you know, whatever they've got. But instead, what this does to the students is they even if they're doing a draft, they look at the draft and they're like, oh my God, I've got 14%. I'm going to get thrown to academic conduct. I'm freaking out. They start calling support. They start calling their grandma, right? What do I do? How do I fix this? Instead of it being a learning opportunity for the faculty to go in and say, okay, let's review, let's look at your draft and figure out where that things are amiss. Where are you missing your quotes? Where are you missing your citations? How can you better phrase this to be in your words rather than in someone else's? How can you attribute this appropriately, but not copy and paste it off of a website, right? So in that regard, there is plenty of opportunity to support the student, but I think it has to begin with the way that we approach the Turnitin results, or any tool for that matter, right? The way that we approach the results and what we do with those results, because we can easily use it as a gotcha technique. But I don't know if we want to be like that anymore. At least I'm hoping we don't.
Right. I actually have a question I'm pulling in from the Q&A that kind of revolves around that exact idea. So the question is, well, it's kind of a multi-part question, so bear with me here.
Yeah.
How are we defining academic integrity? Are we distinguishing between academic integrity and academic honesty? And as a follow-up, what are the personal, pedagogical, and cultural shifts that need to take place to create an environment of academic integrity?
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a loaded one.
It's so great though, because these are the questions I think that we need to ask. You know, we have a lot of F1 students at our institution, so we have a lot of cultures that are coming into the college, and every culture has their own way to deal with academic integrity, academic honesty, all of the academic things, right? There are some things that in one culture are acceptable and in another culture are not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that has been maybe something that's been lacking, is open and honest dialogue about what's expected. You know, when I take my son to a restaurant, you know, and if he's having a bad day, and I know that we're going to go meet people, and I say, listen, here's my expectation. I expect you to not make a scene. I expect you to be polite to the people that you meet. These are my expectations that I'm setting for you. Not because you know, I'm trying to get you to slip up so I can punish you, but because I'm trying to help him become a more well-rounded human being, right? The request is the same, but the intention is different. So in the courses that I'm teaching, I want to bring that elephant out of the room, right? I want to talk about the elephant in the room and then take it out of the room, right? I want to say, listen, here's what the institution considers, like having the frank dialogue. Here's what the institution considers academic dishonesty. Here are the things that it is. It includes reusing your own work, like that the institution considers it. Or maybe the institution doesn't consider it, but you as the instructor do. Setting those expectations up front, more than just in the syllabus, right? Because we all know students will not read the syllabus. They won't read the fine print, just like none of us read the terms and agreements. We don't do it. But having the dialogue, even you know, if it's a totally asynchronous class, you spend 15, 20 minutes to talk through, hey, let's have a real conversation about academic integrity, or have a panel discussion with your students about any questions that they have, and then post that into your course to say, listen, we're covering this. This is what we want to talk about. Then we can go through plagiarism. We can go through contract cheating. We can go through that. Putting stuff up on Course Hero is essentially you taking an exam, shoving it under your sweater and walking out the door and handing it out to your friends. But students don't know. And you know, when I was doing my dissertation, I was using a lot of cultural articles, right? I mean, so it's pop culture, and I'm looking around, and I can't tell you how many websites alone were copying from each other. I couldn't find the original source because there was just this blatant copy paste. Blog posts, you know, any kind of, you know, BuzzFeed news articles. People are just copy pasting all over the place with no attribution, and it's up to us as the instructors to say, yeah, this is not okay. This is not acceptable. We've got to do something different. And the only way we're going to do that is by talking to our students about it, right? Bring that human element into it. Something else I think that is starting to shift for me, and I want to encourage other faculty to do it. Shoot, it just went away from my brain. I will come back to that.
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry.
No. That's absolutely all right. I know there are a lot of ideas flying around here.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of which, we're getting a couple more questions in. A lot kind of around the contract cheating space. So again, in my industry news my reading that I do in the mornings, there are just articles popping up like crazy around some of these companies. I will go ahead and share some of those links in the chat if anyone's interested, but I'm curious, yeah, how can tech and teachers help to kind of like support and send in the students in the face of predatory contract cheating companies during the pandemic? And what has been your contact and experience dealing with some of these contract cheating companies?
Oh, yeah, this is such a topic.
It is.
I like the use of the word predatory, because they really are. You know, Chegg, Course Hero, those are the two that I'm most familiar with. And I haven't even tapped into the, you know, writeyouressay.com or whatever they are. All of those contract cheating houses that are willing to do the work for the student. I've been going to the ICAI conference for the past 4 years, I think. They're was it the International Center for Academic Integrity?
Yep.
Right, there we go. Yep, ICAI. Great organization. A lot of really forward-thinking individuals there who are trying to deal with this very thing because it's plaguing all of academia, right? Here are some things that I've had from takeaways with that. With contract cheating, students are much more likely to cheat on a course if there's nothing relevant in the course to that they can apply right then, right? So, you know, if they don't know why chemistry is important to them, they're not going to really care about it. But if the instructor has the opportunity and the obligation to explain, this is why this is important for you to know. Like, if you don't know the compound matter that's within X, Y, and Z, then this could happen, and whatever it is, we need to be able to create the relevance, because there's nothing, you know, last year when the pandemic hit, my son was in first grade and he was doing worksheet after worksheet after worksheet and then not even turning them in. And we were like, what's the point of this? This is stupid. Why are we doing worksheets that are never going to get graded? They're never going to be seen by the instructor. I mean, it's just coloring, but still, there's no relevance for him. And he hated doing it. But when he was given the option of you can do this or this, whichever one piques your interest, he was like, oh, I've got a freedom here. I've got some choice here. And I think that's one way that we as instructors can begin to work against contract cheating houses in a much more positive way. And that's by making the assessments that we do and the assignments that we do a little more learner centric, right? In that, hey, is there a topic within this field that really interests you? You know, maybe in the second week of the course, the student read something in the textbook. He was like, oh man, that makes me think of X, Y, and Z. And you never go back and touch on it. But what if that student could have the opportunity to then go back to what they learned in the second week and really expound on it and write this amazing paper on what the concept that they learned that really the rest of the course just, you know, kind of left behind. I think that if we can begin to turn our assessments into a way that becomes much more personal to them, and things that they have a stake and a say in, I think we're going to see that start to go down, because students will have something to write about, something because it's them. They don't want to regurgitate something that someone obviously has already written, posted on Course Hero or on Scribd or something, right? They can go and just rip it down and throw it in because they don't care about it. But it's creating that active connection, not only to the content, but to you as the instructor too. I think that's a huge one too. I'm less likely to cheat on an instructor that I know cares about me and values the time that I give them. I'm like, oh, they're invested in me. Let me invest in what they're trying to offer as well.
I think that's a great point. And this is kind of a part of the topic that we were talking about leading up to this event, is that, you know, there seems to be that crossroads there that a student gets to where they have to make a decision if they're going to kind of like go that route for, you know, the pay to play kind of, just call it what it is, contract cheating companies, or are they going to their instructor as like the resource and the support? And we talked about that a little bit the other day. I was wondering if we could unpack it a little bit more about like, how can we help them if they feel like they're at that crossroads to make the right choice?
You know, I think a lot of it comes down to when I don't believe students are inherently bad, right? I believe in humanity. I believe we are generally good. I believe what makes us turn to the dark side in those moments is a sense of panic, a sense of I don't know what to do, a sense of I haven't planned ahead for this, right? I think there's a lot of these last minute choices that students make. It's because they're in a bind, whether they something happened at home, or they've got a sick parent or a sick child that they're trying to take care of while they're trying to do a final exam or something. There some unexpected thing comes up in their life that they didn't anticipate, and it kind of forces them into this mentality of, you're a panicked animal backed into a corner. You don't know what to do, so you just make the most. You take the path of least resistance, even if it's not right. You want to perform well, right? You want to do something good. Um, I think a few ways for us to combat that is, one, to have those check-ins throughout the semester as we go, especially if we're doing like a paper, or if we're doing formative assessments, right? Small, low stakes throughout the assessment, leading up to something big at the end. But if things are low stakes all through the semester, it's going to get students into a groove. It's going to get them into a habit of doing the work each week, just so they can stay engaged with the course and not putting it all off until the very end. For final papers, having them come up with a topic in week 4 and having them submit an outline in week 5 and maybe a couple references in week 7, just to get that pump primed, right? Not only does that eliminate the purpose of contract cheating, because they're having to do it throughout the semester instead of this one shot, but it also keeps them accountable, because they're turning things into you as the instructor, and you can say, yeah, you're right on the right track. This is great. Low stakes, but something to keep them motivated. I think also students don't, it's my assumption that students tend to not think through their choices ahead of time. Tyler, you and I have talked about this a lot, but this idea of choose your own adventure books, they're great because you can have a different story every time, and you can change your decisions based on what you want to do, what the outcome you want, right? I remember reading, I've got a whole stack of them up on my bookshelf. And I remember reading through them as a kid, wanting to get to a certain page and trying to figure out how to navigate the book so I can end up on that page, because that was a really good ending. And it took me a long time to finally wheedle my way through it, right? I think students can approach their academic lives the same way. Where do you want to get to? And what are the steps that you need to take to get there? If that means you need to start working on your stuff 6 weeks before it's due, then do that. But I think we as instructors have the obligation to encourage that in our students. Some will listen, some won't listen, and you can't do anything more than that. But to prime that pump of thinking through how is academic integrity, what would you do in this situation, right? Here's a choice. It's 11:30 at night, your thing is due at midnight, and your computer blows up. What do you do? What do you do, right? I mean, those are situations that we don't often think about, but putting ourselves in those situations, even if they're hypothetical, can at least prime prime the ideas of what students would do in these crisis situations.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, having that kind of like support and accessibility is really important. And kind of along the same lines, we have a comment from Bonnie. She said, and this is a very Turnitin specific question, has there been thought for Turnitin to allow students to create a free account that will allow students to submit their papers, allowing them to review the similarity report editing tools and learning more about citations and grammar-rich resources? There are a couple of different ways that Turnitin approaches this. However, our newest one, I'm going to go ahead and drop it in the chat here, is a new plugin for Google Docs, and it will also be soon to be integrated into the Microsoft space as well. It's called Draft Coach, and it is basically just that. It's very student-centered and kind of like meeting them where they're creating their work. So this is generally a tool that the students will use themselves, kind of like preparing their paper for submission to the teacher. So it's not something that the teacher is necessarily heavily involved in at those early kind of like drafting stages. This is more a formative tool for the students to use. So hopefully that can be helpful for you, Bonnie. Let me see, what's our time check here? I think we have time for a couple more questions. Going back to some of the contract cheating things, there's a question around kind of like maybe your very direct experience with some of these things. How do you deal with the students who buy solutions from websites or who trade solutions between themselves on a given assignment?
It's a hard question, right? Well, I'm assuming the institution has its own policy, right? Excuse me. So I definitely want to work within the institution's policy, but this idea of a couple things are going through my head. Let me try and write them down so I don't forget. I think, if we as faculty are recognizing a pattern of behavior for a specific assignment, or we're seeing something populate over and over and over again, or the same error coming up, we can generally get the idea that someone somewhere has leaked some solution, whatever it is, and students are finding it, tracking it down. To me, that's a red flag. First of all, where are they getting it? And maybe even asking some of your students, hey, I know this happened. I'm recognizing a pattern. Help me be a better instructor and figure out, one, where this came from, so you can pull it down, and two, how to make this a more engaging question or an engaging assignment or whatever, what have you. In terms of the contract cheating, dealing with those types of conduct issues, we work with our conduct committee. Typically, they would result in probably a 0 on the assignment for a first offense. If we're talking hardcore punishment, right? Punishment. If we're talking the hard consequences, it's a better way to say it. If we call it, they would get a 0 on the assignment and say, listen, we know that this is what you did. Here's the proof that we have to do it, or, to prove it. And you got to have proof, right? We all know that you have to have proof. I guarantee there is going to be someone in your organization who loves doing the super sleuth stuff. There is someone. I've got a support guy who loves it, and it's the thrill of the hunt kind of a thing, right? But he's a keyboard warrior, and he just goes to town just searching. He's like a sniper. He can find amazing things. And there are people who you can leverage to do that. And then we work with the sites, primarily right now it's Chegg and Turnitin, or Chegg and Course Hero, sorry. And we work with them to do a takedown notice. And if we find it online, we have them take it down.
What does that process look like?
It's labor intensive. Until you can create a relationship with the vendor, which we do have one with Turnitin. We don't have one with Chegg. Chegg actually has hired a, what were they? It's like a liaison, a faculty liaison with Chegg, so that they can work with faculty to, if things are up, they can help take them down a lot quicker, right? But usually it requires you to have a URL of the piece of content that you want taken down. You've got to, and you can do it all through the website now. It used to be, even 4 years ago, we had to do, what is it, DMCA, I think is what it's called. We had to send in a separate email, or a letter, actually. It had to be a letterhead at the time. So silly. But now, once you establish a relationship with people, we've gotten free unlocks so that we can track down things, right? So you can work with these people. They are walking a very thin line. So they're going to do whatever they can to make you happy while still continuing to prey on students, okay? Just got to walk the line carefully. Did I answer the question? I hope I did.
I think so. Yeah.
There's one more bit. I was going to say, if you're having students that are sharing work with each other, what about making a group assignment, or make an assignment where students are grading each other, right? That peer pressure works incredibly well. If you say, okay, you're going to grade this person, and you're going to grade this person, and these three are going to grade you, let's see how that affects, or how that shifts what you get turned in. Because now all of a sudden students want to show off in front of their friends instead of corroborate with their friends, right? I've often I thought about doing that with, a final exam, making it a group final exam. 5 questions, super hard. As a group, they have to submit it. That's still them working together, and all of them are working together, and they're really synthesizing what it is that they learned all term to bring together into this thing. And now we've eliminated the possibility of people sharing answers between each other. They're collaborating with each other. It's the same idea, just twisted differently, right? It's just the different side of the coin.
Right, absolutely. And I like your idea of kind of like varying assessments. I know that's a big strategy that a lot of instructors use to kind of get around some of these issues. I did drop another link in the chat here when you're talking about peer grading. There is a feature in Turnitin called Peer Mark. And so I dropped in a little link to, if anyone is interested in kind of exploring that a little bit, I'll give you a little bit of a how to and step through this. So I do see that we are slowly running out of time. There's been so much robust chat in the chat. It's hard for me to even keep up. So
I'm
I'm
trying
so
to not
thankful
watch.
that Alexis and Megan are here to
Yeah.
help to moderate some of that. And so before we close out here, Drew, I'm wondering if you can kind of like answer what is the main message that you would like the audience to take away from this event today?
That's such a good question. You know, I would love the audience to take away that there is a way that we can partner with the students rather than work against the students in this whole idea of academic integrity. I know that there are faculty who have been taken advantage of. I know that there are students who will lie to you. I know that's the bold-faced lie. I mean, they've lied directly to me, right to my face, and I have all the evidence. And they're like, "Nope, that wasn't me." I'm like, "I got IP records, I got dates, I got login, I got everything. No, it wasn't me." Okay, I can't help those people. I can't help those students, right? And I fear that sometimes those experiences are the things that have colored and shaped our perspective of academic integrity in general. Like we see academic integrity as a way to catch cheaters, when in fact it's really a way to build people into more whole, robust, functional human beings. So really it becomes a carrot and stick type of a thing, right? We don't. I think there is a way to humanize academic integrity by thinking of the student and how to support the student rather than uh, taking it as an affront to you when you catch someone who's cheated something in your course, right? We don't need to take those things personally, even though because they're probably not personal. There's something going on in that student's life, whatever it might be. There's something going on that we could investigate and tap into. But oftentimes we get triggered by that. And we're like, how could you cheat on me? Like I've been awesome this whole semester. And then you give me this paper that someone else, why are you doing that? Instead of this us versus them or me versus you, it could be this idea of we. Let's come alongside our students a little bit more, recognize some of the struggles that they've had, especially this past year, and leverage the tools that we have to grow their knowledge of how to be more well-rounded human beings in terms of integrity.
I love that. Wonderful. Thank you. So with that, I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Drew Smith from Walsh College for joining us today and for sharing his experiences. I also want to thank you, the audience, for joining us for this event. I hope that our time together today sparks questions, inspiration, and confidence heading into your next teaching experience. I do want to mention that we will be sending a link to the recording of this event along with some follow-up in the next couple of days. So I'm also particularly excited to share that this follow-up email will include a free download of Drew's hot off the press ebook titled "You're the Star of the Story, a narrative approach to reframing academic integrity." I highly encourage everyone to check it out. It explores some of the topics that we talked about today a little bit more in depth. And there's also some really interesting interactive content in there as well. So yeah, it's a lot of fun and I hope you check it out. I think we'll also be dropping a direct link to the download in the chat panel, I think, here today, if you're too eager to wait till tomorrow. But either way you get to it, I hope you really enjoy it. We worked really hard on it. And lastly, as we close out, you will be prompted to fill out a brief SurveyMonkey survey at the very end. The survey helps us to better understand what is most helpful for you in our future programming. So we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And with that said, stay safe, stay strong, and thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thank you all. Thank you.